Regina was not sure she could live that life, not sure she could endure the day-long drives and visits, always behind glass, while her as-yet unborn kid grew up without a father. She was not sure at all. "I don't know how Lisa does it," she said. In his cell, Rico weighed the odds of beating his case. He recalled that during his last trial, when he faced 25 years to life, he'd expected the verdict to be guilty. He'd expected both of them to be crushed, but in the end, partly with the help of that expert's research paper, he got off. He called Regina to remind her of this. He wanted to tell her it wasn't hopeless. She said, well, actually he was acquitted because he prayed. "You better start praying," she warned. "I've been through serious cases before. Well, it don't hurt to get on your knees sometimes and pray." Praying only worked on your knees. "Your knees," she told him. "Hell no, man," Rico said. "We ain't got no carpet." He asked if she was heavily involved in church again, and Regina admitted that she was struggling with it, but yes, she was making the effort. "It really don't matter to me, you know," he said. "The only thing is, you change up too much when you're in church, but..." "You said what?" "You change up too much when you're in church." "I what?" "You start tripping on sinning and all that shit." He stopped himself. Why the hell did he say that? Nothing pissed a woman off more than ragging on her about church. "But it's up to you," he quickly added. Regina delivered the next words with care. If Rico ended up beating this case and then didn't go to church with her, they were through. "Why?" he asked. "'Cause I'm not going to give up church. I'm not going to do that again." She had to draw a line, and if that meant losing him, so be it. Why couldn't they be like Lisa and Baki? Even before Baki caught his attempted murder case, Lisa had convinced her man to go to church every week, and they were both better off for it. Why couldn't Rico do this one little thing for her? And why did they have to live in sin, as if they were hiding from God? She was drifting farther from him every time he called. If he didn't make himself say the words he was so carefully avoiding, he might lose her forever. "We'll just get married," he said finally, "and then the church can't say shit." Though she didn't blurt out a yes, it was what she'd been waiting to hear. Encouraged, his next words tumbled out heavy with tenderness. "I could have been saying wife instead of girlfriend," she interrupted, finishing his thought, as if at that moment they had instantly become one. He laughed. "Old lady, I don't say girlfriend." She feigned indignation, but was clearly pleased. "Why did you say old lady?" she complained. "Make me feel old like a granny." And so it was done. There was no ring, no suitor on a bended knee, no rose petals, and no kisses. Not a flutter of hearts while staring into each other's eyes. Just the usual static breathing into the phone, the eternal racket and shouts coming from the jail tears beyond. But none of that mattered. Rico had finally proposed. Many months later, the judge prepared to announce the court's decision as a small crowd gathered in the courtroom. Rico stood at attention in his jail's jumpsuit, his attorney by his side. It had been a long and rocky haul to arrive at this point, and at this moment in his life and future rested in this judge's hands. His lawyer had gotten him a bench trial. No jury, just the defense, the prosecution team, and a judge. Going for this risky option had been a leap of faith, but Rico trusted his lawyer like a brother. The attorney, a friendly-looking guy with graying hair, was pretty cool. Rico loved how the guy spoke in terms of we, as if they were partners, as if the counselor too had been unjustly accused of his client's alleged crimes. This duo, Rico and the top Nuestra Familia expert in the public defender's office, had together suffered long months of legal wrangling, winning a few battles while losing others. Now they would see the fruits of destruction of their efforts. During the previous months, the prosecutors had thrown everything they could find at him. At one point, the cops picked up on some bullshit involving a stabbing of a guy called Louis the Beast at a Toro Park barbecue, and for a minute, they tried to stick that one on Rico too. Then, just when the hit on Pablo charges were looking strong, Rico's prospects for freedom hit their lowest low. The DA filed a second solicitation for murder charge. The prosecutors claimed that Rico had contracted a fellow jail inmate to kill some guy, and they had the inmate ready to swear it under oath. Adding to all this stress, Rico and his now fiancée, Regina, got into a stupid argument over his court clothes. It started when he curtly told Regina he did not care to look ridiculous in some Western cowboy shirt. Luckily for Rico, it took a lot to fluster Regina. "I'll probably pick out some nice shirts like all the brothers wear when they go to church," she replied to his little outburst. No, I don't want to start doing that shit, Rico continued. There's some nice shirts. They're not ugly, all square. They're nice. I want some that's not gonna make me look like a gang member. You don't, she said. Hopefully there's a nice beige and brown one. Like the kind of print that me and you took pictures in. Yeah, I wasn't too thrilled about that shirt. Regina kept her cool. You didn't look funny in it, she said. I feel like I did. Well, then why'd you wear it? Because you fucking weren't gonna take no for an answer. Well, she said, shirts like that, I didn't have no other shirts to take a picture in. That's what it was. All my shirts are all faded. That's your fault. She was right, as usual. And he wasn't going to win this one. I know, he said in defeat. I should have bought clothes instead of beer. In the end, after all this grief with this woman, Rico had never needed the court clothes because no jury was going to see them. His attorney convinced him to take that risky step of going for the bench trial. The lawyer was hopeful the judge would throw it all out. Sure, the charge of soliciting to hit Pablo was strong, but the second charge was pretty weak. The prosecutors had run into a huge problem. Their snitch had told police that while in jail one fine spring day, Rico had asked him to whack another individual. Later, the snitch changed the date of this alleged conversation to December, but only after a records check proved the snitch wasn't even locked up in the spring. Stupid. So now the snitch's credibility was, fortunately for Rico, in the toilet. Of course, there was a strong chance his lawyer's gamble could swing the wrong way. If the fucking newspapers were any indication, Rico was not the most popular defendant in town. Those journalists always made shit up, made him look guilty. Even had him saying some random remark about Little Man in one story. In Monterey County, the deck was always stacked against him. And now, on this day, when his marriage, his future, indeed, the future of the Salinas Regiment, all hung on this judge's words, Rico stood at attention as a court reporter sat poised, fingers ready to dance over the keyboard and coldly record the direction of his life would now take. The prosecutors did as expected, painting him as a cold-blooded gang leader who ordered murders over the phone as casually as you call for a Chinese takeout. When it was time for Rico's lawyer to speak, the defender argued that there was insufficient evidence on both counts. The discredited snitch's charge was a non-issue. On the order to hit Pablo, well, that was a matter of misinterpretation. When Rico said during that prison call that he wanted Pablo dealt with, he could have meant a stern lecture, a bit of firm but brotherly guidance. There was no proof whatsoever that he was talking about murder or even violence. The prosecution replied that such an interpretation was nonsense. Rico was a known and rising gang leader and never would have ordered one of his minions to give a green-lighted dropout like Pablo a mere talking to. Dealt with meant killed. The judge had listened to all this, pondered it, and was ready to pass the verdict. If Rico went down this time, 9, 10, 15 years, it didn't matter. He'd never see his child grow up, and he and Regina would not survive the years he'd languished in Pelican Bay. Maybe he'd been lucky far too many times, and this was the day his fortune would change, the day all his shit would catch up to him. But fate had its own plans for Rico as the impossible words rang out. All charges are dismissed. The prosecutors and cops reeled. Rico and his lawyer exhaled, savoring the stunning upset. The county's case vanished as freely as swallows fluttering out of an open window. Rico picked up his clothes and belongings, and as he walked from the jail, a victorious and free man, the crushing truth of this day could never be ignored, not by cops or gang-fearing residents, not by his underlings or his superiors. Rico was simply untouchable. Back home, he had no time to sit with Regina and the baby in the church pew. He and Lobo needed to take charge of Salinas. It wasn't long after Rico's release that, during the dog days of August, the newspaper reported one of the most brazen execution-style hits in Salinas history. The body of the Nuestra Familia Regiment boss, Michael, was found in a fanning pool of blood outside of Los Padres' apartments. It was the same parking lot where Mondo's friend Roy and the Border brother were killed. Once again, no one who lived there saw or heard a thing. The shock of that terrible event served to remind everyone of the preciousness of life, and it awakened the romantic in Chico. 1 week after Michael's murder, he and Regina drove to Reno. Cruising the strip on that Friday night, they spotted a reasonably priced chapel. Beneath a sign that hung on a rainbow-colored neon totem pole, the place prided itself on being Reno's prettiest little white chapel. And indeed, by daylight it was. The wooden 1940 structure had a fairy tale gingerbread appearance with steep gabled roofs jutting in all directions. The place was the first in Reno to offer drive-through ceremonies, although Rico and Regina did not avail themselves of that convenience. The wedding would be modest. Regina's eldest son joined them to serve as witness. Her closest girlfriend would be maid of honor, and her friend's sister came along too. That was the extent of the wedding party. The baby was home with a relative. Regina did have a wedding dress though, because they'd been supposed to marry months earlier and kept postponing. It was finances, forever going to court and pick him up and have a charge for this or a charge for that, she complained. Then when her girlfriend offered to drive them to Reno, it came together perfectly, or almost perfectly. On the big day, Regina couldn't find shoes to go with the dress. She needed a little more time. It was crazy, but she had to admit she felt the jitters. Baby, she told Rico, let's do it tomorrow. He was a reasonable man. What was one more day? By Sunday, she was more than ready. On August 23, 1998, within the ivory and gold draped walls of the Chapel of the Bells, a pretty white-haired lady with the bluest of eyes declared Regina Cruz had at last become Miss Rico Wayne Garcia. It wasn't lost on the jubilant couple that Regina could now invoke spousal privilege and couldn't be forced to testify against her man.